The President is on standby there in the Luthuli House. He is to address us, as I mentioned earlier on, with regards to Youth Day commemorations that we, of course, do celebrate tomorrow on June 16. Let's take you straight there then.
These young people were impatient, they were angry, they were courageous, they were brave, and they were determined. Through their actions, they set in motion a chain of events that eventually led to the end of apartheid and the dawn of our new democracy. On this occasion, we also remember the visionaries who established the ANC Youth League in the 1940s to set a more radical path towards freedom. We remember the young people who joined Umkhonto Wesizwe in their thousands at its formation, determined that the people of South Africa should not submit to the tyranny of apartheid, but should fight back with all the means within their power. We also pay tribute to the young lions of the 1980s, whose militant defiance and selfless sacrifice drove the National Party government to the brink of defeat. On this day, we salute the young people of the democratic South Africa, who over the course of 26 years have thrived and have strived to build a new society founded on justice, equality, and peace. Like the generations who came before them, these young people have worked towards the creation of a united, democratic, non-racial, non-sexist, and prosperous South Africa. In doing so, the young people of today are grappling with the legacy of a past that, despite the progress that we have made in our democracy over the 26 years, continues in so many ways to determine the circumstances of the present. For young people, this is particularly a bitter legacy. Although we have achieved near universal access to basic education, many young people leave school without the skills and the experience that is necessary to find meaningful employment. And although we have massively increased enrollment in higher education and have broadened access to students who come from poor and middle-class families, we have yet to break the cycle of poverty that is passed from one generation to the next. Yet, like the generations that have come before them, young South Africans refuse to accept the constraints that the past has placed on their present. They are determined to forge a better future for themselves and their communities. They are not held back by bitterness, despair, resignation, or defeat. They are challenging the prejudice, the norms, and social rules that hinder their progress. They are showing themselves to be the agents of revolutionary change. Revolutionary change is in their DNA. Young South Africans have been leading the transformation of institutions of higher learning, have been central to the fight against gender-based violence and femicide, and have been vital in promoting behavior change to combat the spread of HIV. They are the ones who have achieved new levels of excellence in science and technology, in arts and sports, in business, and in professions. Importantly, young South Africans have been driven by a progressive political consciousness that informs the kind of society that they seek to build, but also the country that they seek and want to live in. It is a society in which there is opportunity for all, not just for some. It is a society in which the divides of race, gender, and class, and place of origin are confronted and are overcome. This year we celebrate Youth Day at a time of gross and grave anxiety and disruption. The world continues to suffer as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. Here at home, we have now entered the period of rapidly increasing infections and, sadly, more loss of life. Throughout this period, we call on young people to draw on the enormous reserve that they have, the reserve of courage, reserve of bravery, the reserve of commitment that inspired our forebears and face all the challenges head on. Gender-based violence continues to plague our country, and we've been saddened by the continuous and recurring news of men attacking and killing women in the past few weeks. And men continue to kill women in the most horrific and barbaric fashion. The women of our country feel unsafe in their homes. They do not feel safe in their workplace as well, at places of worship, and even just walking in the street. This is a totally unacceptable situation, and it must end. Young people, and in particular young men, must become even more active in the fight against gender-based violence in the light of all these barbaric and horrific attacks that are being perpetrated against the women of our country. Government is strengthening laws to provide greater protection and support for survivors and increase sentences for perpetrators. We are rolling out more sexual offenses courts and providing more training for law enforcement officers. However, these measures must be supported by a society that is willing to work together to prevent these murderous acts from taking place. The culture of silence around gender-based violence must also come to an end. Young people, when you know your friends or relatives are victims, be compassionate and listen and offer practical support and do not judge. Let victims be your guide in how to tackle their situation. Share widely information about professional support available in your community, as well as at your educational institutions. When you know your friends or relatives are perpetrators, do speak up All too often, we stay silent until it is too late. Young South Africans are also taking up global challenges. The heinous murder of George Floyd in the United States has brought to the fore tremendous pain. It has also brought sadness and outrage, but it has also brought a renewed commitment to fight racism and injustice as it happens. Across the world, people have been united in saying Black Lives Matter. And Black lives do matter indeed. This has had some positive effects. Governments, organizations, and companies have been showing greater willingness to tackle racism and bias and prejudice in society. Racists are being confronted with greater regularity, and people are showing great unity across race, gender, class, and religious lines to fight racism. And this is to be welcomed. This is a good beginning, but much more still needs to be done. Here in our own country, we need to take a hard look at social cohesion and the all too often frequent flare-ups of incidents of racism. I commend the courage of the teenagers and young adults who spoke up about the racism they experience at schools in our own country. Let us now build on this courage and embark on a systematic program to root out racism in the education system. But we also need to root it out everywhere. This means empowering educators and learners, strengthening curricula, and broadening access for learners and students from historically disadvantaged communities to reflect a more complete picture of South African society. Fundamentally, society needs what I would call a mindset change. This will not happen without a concerted public education campaign that will help to change entrenched attitudes. Young people must become involved in the Alliance's anti-racism campaign and participate fully in all the planned activities. While campaigning against racism and gender-based violence, we must also ensure that we heed public health and safety measures to prevent the spread of the virus. Coronavirus will be with us for the foreseeable future. It has in many ways changed the world fundamentally and has forced us to adapt to new ways of living, working, and socializing. Our country must remain steadfast in our efforts to fight against the pandemic. We have had to take extraordinary measures to delay the spread of the virus, including the closure of our borders and a nationwide lockdown. For 66 days, our economy was at a virtual standstill, and it is only in the last 2 weeks that most economic activities have been able to resume. As a result of the pandemic, our economy is expected to contract quite significantly. Public revenue will plummet, and the dire unemployment situation that we currently have in our country will worsen. This is particularly difficult on young people whose studies have been interrupted, whose businesses may need to close, who may lose jobs, and who do not have the benefit of savings or assets. Coronavirus has exacerbated the deep racial, economic, and social inequalities in our country. This virus has just laid them bare. We must ensure that our response to coronavirus and our economic recovery program puts in place a more just, equitable, and prosperous society. Young people in particular have been severely disadvantaged by the effects of the pandemic, and we need to ensure that they lead the economic and social recovery that must follow. Young people are the ones who are mostly going to lose jobs as a result of this pandemic. The 500 billion relief package that government announced several weeks ago is directed at those businesses and workers most badly affected and vulnerable households. By providing a 6-month top-up for social grant recipients and introducing a temporary special COVID-19 grant for unemployed people in our country, government has sought to put cash into the hands of the poor as quickly and as efficiently as possible. These measures, which are quite historic in their scale as well as their reach, are an immediate response to an unforeseen crisis that we are going through now. However, we will need to put in place further measures in the medium to long term to ensure that the economy is able to recover and that the jobs that have been lost in some way or fashion can be regained as soon as possible. That is why on this Youth Day, we should focus on the place and the role of young people in the reconstruction of our country after the coronavirus. Already work is being undertaken within the ANC and the Alliance to forge a new economic path that not only returns the country to growth, but which fundamentally changes the way the economy is structured and functions. An immediate task is to create employment by expanding public employment programs, by increasing investment in public infrastructure as well as services, and enabling greater job creation by the private sector. We need to put deliberate measures in place to ensure young people and youth employment are prioritized in terms of these initiatives. The Presidential Youth Employment Intervention that we announced earlier this year will play a central role in this whole effort, but it will need to be scaled up and work alongside a range of other interventions that we have in mind. Progress is being made within government to increase investment in infrastructure with several major projects that are ready for implementation, what we call shovel-ready projects. We should also see infrastructure investment that mobilizes funding from a variety of public as well as private and multilateral sources as a significant stimulus that our economy needs right now. This pandemic has highlighted the vital importance also of the informal sector, what other people call the second economy, and of the small business sector in meeting the basic needs of our people. Our program of economic recovery needs to provide greater support to these enterprises, which provide income and employment to many people, but also to many young people. These are some of the issues on which young people need to be engaged in the next weeks and months as we put in place the building blocks and the pillars of a sustainable economic recovery. We do not want to return to where we were before coronavirus struck. We want to use this opportunity to forge a new economic path that is more inclusive, more durable, much more sustainable, and more transformative than we had before. We want to build a new economy, a new economic thrust for a new and better society. As we know from our history, the struggle for the achievement of a new society cannot progress without political conscientization, organization, and mobilization. It is therefore vital that the formations of the Progressive Youth Movement and the ANC Youth League in particular are strengthened and restored as true champions of youth empowerment and development. South Africa's youth COSAS, a strong SASCO. We need a strong progressive youth alliance capable of leading young people. As before, all these formations need to earn their position as representatives and being the champions of the interests of young people. They do need to demonstrate the militancy of those who formed the ANC Youth League in 1944, the selflessness of those who joined the ranks of MK in the early 60s. They must also demonstrate the courage of those who rose up against the imposition of Afrikaans on young people in 1976, and the political consciousness of those who led the student and the youth formations in the 1980s. So the young people of today, they have a lot of role models. They can emulate one for positions of influence, not for pursuit of factional interests or for money, but to improve the lives of young South Africans. Now, in line with the resolutions of the 54th National Conference of the ANC, this requires a far-reaching program of renewal and rebuilding within the Youth League and broader formations. But it also requires a return to the basic progressive democratic way of organization, a clear articulation of the needs and the wishes of young people, but more importantly, understanding what young people want, understanding where young people are, and also understanding where young people wish to go. our country finds itself with a perfect opportunity to reshape our core, will be called upon to contribute to rebuilding a stronger, more just and humane society. I wish all young South Africans a peaceful, inspirational, and happy Youth Day. I thank you.